All right, good afternoon. David Johnson here from Grow the Dream. Excited to kick off another strategy stream today, and I am glad that you are here. We've got some exciting things that we're going to talk about today. At least I believe they'll be exciting. I find them that way. And again, really thrilled that you're here with us today, live on YouTube. And we have some of our team here who are going to help us out, posting some links and all that sort of good stuff. I just want to quickly remind you why we're doing this. And I want to reconnect it with some really important things about your business this year. This is a very challenging and interesting time that we're in. Things are changing rapidly. As we broadcast, if you will, today, using that term loosely, we're just a few days out from the U.S. election. That could change a lot of different things. Not going to be political today, but it's very clear that if you own a business, you operate a business, you're in charge of marketing or growing revenue for a business or a nonprofit organization, that the environment that we're operating in here in 2020 is bizarre and different and rapidly changing. We have the pandemic. There are factors around society opening back up. Is your business going to be open for business in the near future? All that sort of good stuff. So again, I don't want to rehash all of that, but just to set a little bit of context for this, what it means is that we have to be strategic with our resources. Nobody has a crystal ball about what's coming up. We don't have any sense of, precise facts about various outcomes. Who will win the election, regardless of who wins the election, what does that mean for our business, our organization, our customers, our buyers, the marketplace in which we operate? Will there be unrest? Will there be a peaceful transition of power? Again, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, there are some open questions right now around what will happen next. And so, politically, and again, I'm talking about the U.S., but this affects the global marketplace. When will there be a vaccine available? When will the pandemic slow down? All that stuff. So many unknowns. And so, because we have limited knowledge about what's coming next, because we do not have unlimited time or money, we have to be strategic about our resources and how we go about growing our businesses. And so, the purpose of this time that we spend together here on Strategy Stream every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern is we're walking through a strategic process that you may have even been through before. You might have even been one of our clients that we've walked through this exact process with, or some version of it. Or you may have had this kind of strategic underpinnings that form the foundation of your marketing or your business strategy in the past. Even if all that's true, everything has changed so dramatically this year in so many ways, some really positive for certain types of businesses, some negative, that because things are different, it's time to revisit this stuff. So one of the things that we're doing is just to give back to our community of business owners, entrepreneurs, marketers, people that we've interacted with over the years in so many different ways. We want to give back to this fantastic community by, at no charge, walking you through this strategic process. And of course, there would be benefits that you get one-on-one that we aren't able to do here, and even in group settings, which is how we've often conducted this kind of work with, especially at a larger scale. We've done group environments. So yeah, there would be benefits to that you're not going to be able to get from here, but you'll benefit from the strategic process. So I'm delighted that you're here. We're excited about walking through some of this stuff together, and let's dive right in because we have a lot to cover today, and I'm excited about making some progress, and I hope you are as well. If you have questions or comments, I do want to mention that our team is here, and you're welcome to type in as we go on the YouTube chat, and we'll be delighted to respond as it's possible for us to do that here. And I'll try to keep an eye on that as well as we go. But we're going to dive right in. So far, we've talked about a couple of really key strategic components with respect to digital marketing and marketing strategy. And so just to, again, set a little bit of context and create a backdrop for today's focus, let's take a look at what we have covered so far in previous strategy streams. So we have said that your marketing is like a three-legged stool. You know, the strategic foundation for your business it rests on a three-legged stool, if you will. And the reason that we say that is because, you know, a three-legged stool won't stand up if one of those legs is missing. So for your marketing strategy, we've talked about this in terms of, first of all, knowing not just who the target market is that you're trying to reach out to, but very specifically who the bullseye is in that target, so that you can be far more effective at very specifically knowing who they are and knowing what's going on in their world. So it just makes everything that you do more powerful, not to just talk about things in terms of your target, but also the very, very narrowly defined and very specific bullseye for your target. So the second piece, the second leg, if you will, of the stool is the archer with the bow. Again, you know, using the sort of classic archery analogy, you have the archer on one side, you have the target on the other of this field, let's say. Who is the archer with the bow? Well, that's you. That's your business. That's who we are as business owners, as the business or organization that we run or represent. Not just, you know, who we are in sort of general terms, but very specifically, and again, this harkens back to what we covered last week in detail. What is it that is true about your identity as a business from the standpoint of the bullseye in your target market? What are they really buying from you? What are you really selling? What's your true product or service? Not defined by the widget that you sell or the service, if you will, that you deliver, but more specifically, what is the real value? Why do people trade money? And I hope that you took some time to maybe find that out from some customers. Why is it they buy from you? What is it they're paying for? The classic analogy is, you know, people don't buy a drill bit, they buy the hole. So your method of delivery of that product or service, irrespective, what is the outcome that they're most interested in? And that gets to the identity question. Again, not going to rehash, but just to kind of lay some foundation. So today, we're going to talk about the arrow. What is it that archer fires from the bow? That's you as the business, that will actually penetrate the heart of the bullseye. And again, I'm using very specific language here. What are you going to fire from your bow that will penetrate the heart of the bullseye? That's the arrow's job. It's to go right to the bullseye and penetrate the heart. Well, when we talk about heart, that's on purpose. The language that we're using here is specific. The purpose of your message, which is what the third leg of this stool is. If the first leg is the target and the bullseye more specifically, the second leg is your identity and being very clear about your identity, your true product or service. Then what is it that you fire that will penetrate the heart of that bullseye and cause them to respond to whatever it is that you put out in terms of messaging? And so we're going to talk today about not a specific message in terms of, you know, a given advertisement or a social media post or a blog post or your website copy. We're going to talk about something a little more foundational than that. We're going to sort of like raise our perspective a little higher, and we're going to say, from a high level viewpoint, what is the overarching message that you want to convey strategically from your business? And there are lots of exercises that you may have been through to sort of work on messaging in the past. You may have, had a 30-second elevator pitch. You may have gone through the process of developing a mission statement or a tagline or any number of other exercises along those lines. And I don't want to in any way subtract any value from those types of exercises, but those are not what we're here to do today. What we're here to do today is to think about your messaging from purely the strategic standpoint and to develop a very clear idea from if you think of it like if all of the messages that your business puts out, again, social media posts, website copy, advertisements, taglines, business cards, messages you fly from behind an airplane on a banner, I don't know, however you communicate your message. If those various mechanisms are streams, then what we're talking about today goes to the headwaters. at the very top, what's the source, the wellspring? What's the fundamental character of all of those messages? All right. So this exercise may seem a little bit obvious, but I guarantee you that it's worthwhile, even if you've been through this exact version of this exercise again, previously. It's worthwhile to think through it with me strategically today again, because our goal here is to make everything you do next, as we all emerge from the global pandemic, as we move out of 2020, thank God, into 2021, which I do remember saying how grateful I was to end 2019. And so, I mean, hopefully 2021 will be far better. But regardless of whether the conditions change for the better or worse, we've got to move forward effectively and strategically, making the maximum use of all of our resources. So we've got to be strategic. So again, think through this exercise with me. Now, to start things off today with the exercise itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a marketing case study. And this harkens back certainly pre-COVID-19. So, please keep in mind that this thought process, especially for the very specific example we're going to use, is pre-COVID-19, as are many of the others that we've used so far at Strategy Stream. But more importantly, this goes back to a time not pre-internet, but pre-web, if you will. So the internet certainly has been around a lot longer than the web. But when we think about this particular case study, we're going to be thinking about a time period in the mid-90s. Some of us, the geeks among us, were in fact on the web when this study was conducted, but many of us were not. So I'm going to ask you to please put your marketing hat on and imagine, if you will, that you work for a high-end furniture retailer. So again, pre-pandemic, and although it may matter a little less that this is pre-web, it's the mid-90s. You are in charge of marketing for a high-end furniture retailer. So that means you may not manufacture the stuff, but you sell it directly to the end users, and of course, maybe not just end users, maybe designers and others that work with them, right? So you're in charge of marketing, and I'm going to ask you this question. What is the single most common attribute of your buyer? And again, using our strategic process here, we're talking about not just a broad segment of your buyers, but the ideal customers, if you will, those who fit the bullseye of your target market. What do they most have in common with each other? And if you think about market research, you've probably been down this road, at least vicariously through something in your industry, perhaps, where someone did a study of the buyers of your widgets or your products or whatever, and you learned. So think about all the demographic characteristics that you might imagine your ideal customer to have. And again, we're assuming that you are in charge of marketing for a high-end furniture retailer. And while you're thinking about that, I will pull from my library here the book that this study is published in, or that I learned about it in. It wasn't originally published here, but this was a book called Predatory Marketing by Britt Beamer, published in, I don't know, mid-90s, somewhere in 96 probably, something like that. 97. Okay, so not too far. So pretty close to the time period after the study was conducted. So you're in charge of marketing for a high-end furniture retailer. Think about your buyers. They're spending more on furniture than the average customer, let's say. They're buying maybe you might call them luxury items. The quality of the materials is higher. The purchase experience is not, waltz into a low-end furniture retailer where it's, no money down and payments forever on stuff that's going to fall apart before you've paid it off. You know what I mean? Like, these are high-end products. Maybe you might even think about some of them as heirloom furniture items, right? You may have a designer involved in that's helping your buyer pick the stuff out, but they're picking high-end stuff. So think about that buyer. What do you think about when you think about that demographic? What do they have in common with each other most? Okay, so if we were doing this with a live group, if I were on stage, which I've talked about this on stage many times with in front of conferences and entrepreneurial groups and business owners and marketers and whatnot. Certainly, we've gone through this in our group training programs. We would actually ask you, and so I'm going to pretend that we have a live, group of highly interactive vocal people here, and I would say these are the items that we often hear that are correlated with people who spend money on big ticket furniture items. Okay, so one of the things that we often hear is higher income. I mean, these are people that make more money. They tend to be the top income brackets, right? So that's one of the first things we hear from people. Is it that they are all higher income people, these buyers, right? So what do they most have in common with each other? Is it higher income? What would you say? If you were in charge of marketing and you were talking about a high-end furniture retailer, what would you say? Another of the items might be the value of the home. Where are you going to put the furniture? I mean, you wouldn't put high-end furniture in a lower value home, right? So you might assume that they're going to be the vast majority of these people. The strongest correlation is either going to be the income level or maybe the value of the property where the furniture is going to be, right? What else might you suggest? I mean, if you were to guess today, what would you toss out? Would it be another demographic type factor? Would it be geography? Would it be an age bracket? Would they only be in an age bracket where they had finally arrived at earning that higher income? What might you toss out? Well, a lot of times audiences will say they're educated, right? So maybe they're in better education levels. They've got a college degree or whatever the case may be. And so this study was conducted in late 1994 for it was an industry group, I believe, but ARG was the research group behind this study. Okay, here's what they found. Are you ready? How are you doing? If you're keeping track at home, right? Which one of these is going to be the most important, highest correlation factor that you could say this describes our buyer, right? Well, here's what they found. 65% of the buyers were what you would classify as high income. Using, I don't know, we don't have the details in the study, but whatever the criteria were they used at the time, high income only represented a 65% correlation across their buyers. The value of the home, even less, right? 53% of them lived in a home that would be considered a high value home. Education, we're getting further, like we're getting colder here, right? 38% had a higher education level, better education level. The single most important factor, though, you might say, well, 65%, that's not bad, right? That's got this bell curve. We got, if we can describe 6 out of 10 or more of our target audience with one single factor, that's not bad, right? But the single most important factor actually had a 95% correlation across their buyers. So, as we talk today in 2020, you've got your marketing hat on. You're in charge of marketing for a high-end furniture retailer. What would you say is the single most important factor? Is it, if it's not their income level, if it's not the value of their home, if it's not their education level, what would you say they have in common with each other, these buyers? Well, to answer this question, we need to understand a little bit more about what's actually driving the purchase. Most of us need furniture. Okay, so we got to have a place to sit. If you're going to buy a TV, you're probably not going to watch the TV standing up. Are you going to sit on a sofa, a couch, a chair, a recliner? What's it going to be? Where do you get that? Is it all about function? Is it about form? Is it about the material? Well, if you're the person buying higher end stuff to put in your living room, let's say, what would drive you to spend that much more money on the furniture? Think about that. All right, so take your marketing hat off for a second and put your consumer hat on. What would drive you to go to a place that you know is going to cost you more money? That you're intentionally setting out to find high-end stuff and pay more for it than you would have to pay if you were just looking for, say, function or comfort, right? Maybe you need to spend a little more than typical or average or whatever to get better comfort, but we're talking about high-end stuff here, right? So what drives your purchase decision? And this, my friend, is the question that you want to be asking yourself when you think about your own buyer. And we brought this up previously. In fact, this case study is a little bit of a walkthrough of our strategic process, because we're talking about first we're starting with who. Who is it? Do they have a higher income? Do they live in a nicer home? Do they have a higher education level, right? We're talking about who they are. And so for you, as you think about, answering this type of question for you, rather than think purely about who they are, I then want you to also think about what drives their purchase decision, which is a big part of what we talked about last week. So for this group today, we would need to revisit this concept that we did talk about last week. Most buying decisions are ultimately based on emotion, and I even would argue probably all. That gets philosophical or maybe academic or something else, so we don't want to get lost in that debate. But clearly, emotion is behind buying decisions. It doesn't matter how left-brained. There used to be a lot of conversations around masculine versus feminine. Would the feminine gender be emotional when they go to the car lot, and the masculine gender be, the one that's, about the fuel economy or the features of the safety of the car or whatever, right? All of that goes out the window. We're all emotional, okay? It doesn't matter how you justify or rationalize, which, by the way, is what we do after our emotions have been captured. Now, remember, strategically today, we're talking messaging. So we're talking about what's going to penetrate the heart of the bullseye of your target market. What kind of message, what fundamental ideas or idea will be the most compelling to capture them emotionally? This is why we're asking that question, because buying decisions are based on emotion. This is one of these axioms you hear me repeat over and over. The mind justifies what the heart desires. We've said it before on Strategy Stream. We'll say it again. Sales functions and maybe some latter stage marketing functions are about giving, justification for the decision to purchase, right? But they're not about capturing the heart of the buyer. Capturing the heart of the buyer is what marketing's job really is all about. So the mind justifies what the heart desires. To know what the heart desires, we need to know who we're talking to. We need to know what's going on in their world. We need to understand why they buy from us. And we're really diving into that, even though we talked about your true product or service last week. We're taking this to the next level today. So what emotions might be driving? I'm going to ask you to put your marketing hat back on. You're now the in charge of marketing for this high-end furniture retailer. What emotions might be driving the buyer's decisions when they're purchasing from you if you're the high-end furniture retailer? Think about that. In front of audiences, a lot of times I'll ask, for real-time answers. What emotions? Now, again, we're talking emotions here. Some of us struggle with talking about emotions. I've been in therapy off and on over the years, couples therapy, and I rate very highly on the scale of someone who, when asked about my emotions, will answer, "Well, I think," and then that's usually where the therapist stops and he goes, "No, I'm not asking you what you think. I'm asking you what you feel." Right? What do you feel when you're thinking? There I go again with thinking. But what is it that you're feeling when you decide, I'm going to go to a high-end place? I'm going to buy the higher end. I have two options for the couch. I'm going to buy the super high-end option. What emotion might be behind that? And this is where I'm going to take just a moment and say, if you are following along at home and you would like some resources related to what we're talking about here, I am going to track down and send out a copy of an emotional tool that will help you identify emotion words, because again, some of us struggle with this. Great copywriters get this. Great writers in general actually really get this because we think about emotions frequently when we write effectively. So I'm taking a sip of coffee while you think about it. What are the emotions? Emotional words that we might think about. We might think about things in terms of happiness, sadness, worry is an emotion. Anxiety is a manifestation of something that's emotional in nature. greed gets brought up, and yeah, you could maybe argue that there's some emotional component to greed. I would argue greed itself may not be an emotion, but there may be some underlying emotions that present as greed. But emotions, again, what are emotions? Think about your own purchases. What has driven you to make a decision? Not the thinking stuff, not the features and the functions. Maybe the benefits, What benefit are you looking for when you buy a higher end piece of furniture? Is it comfort? Is there an emotion that would drive you to want more comfort? There might be a disposition. Maybe you're selfish and you just think everything should be about you and your comfort. Okay, fine. But is there an emotion under there? You see what I'm doing? Like it can be tricky to get to emotions if you're not accustomed to thinking this way. And again, I enjoy having a dialogue with a client or with a group of people as we walk through this. And that's not something that we can directly do right now with this format. So I'm going to move forward as if we had already had some discussion about that, and I'm not going to drag out the answer, any further. So what about your business as you think about your business? Again, I want to really bring this back to you. What is it about your business? What's driving that purchase in the minds and hearts of your buyer? And I'm going to ask you, is there a fear driving the people you're marketing to? Why would I ask you that question? We've said it before, even in the strategy stream. And if you missed some of the earlier episodes, you may want to go back and get those. So, which reminds me, I didn't finish my thought a moment ago. And I took my ADHD medication today. If you're interested in some resources like that emotional piece of content I mentioned a moment ago, or maybe some other checklists or cheat sheets or some notes or some things, then shoot us an email. Go to your email client and crank out a message to hello@growthedream.com. And we'll gladly hear from you, and we'll add you to the list of people who are going to get these resources moving forward, and we'll send you anything that we've already prepared. So shoot us a note at hello@growthedream.com via email, or there's a link already on the chat for today's strategy stream that goes to the strategy stream page on our website, growthedream.com/strategy stream. And there's a place where you can sign up for reminders if you want to be reminded about stuff. And there are other resources there, and we'll be adding to those over time. So another great place for you to go. So again, thinking about your own business, is there a fear driving the people that you're marketing to? And I ask that question specifically because I would argue that when we got to the answer, the actual data from the 2-year study that was conducted for this high-end furniture retailer, I would argue that there was a fear behind the purchase. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, what could these people be afraid of that would cause them to spend more money on furniture than maybe the average person? And again, the data that we're going to go to here is a little dated. So this could have changed, but the idea is not different in 25 years later, right? The ideas behind this study are not going to be different. All right, so the average American at the time this book was published, and at the time of this study, in the mid-90s, would entertain guests in their home infrequently. And so when we're talking about entertaining guests, we're talking about inviting guests over for a prepared meal. So this isn't the, hey, drop by for coffee, or you're out to dinner with friends or whatever, and you're like, yeah, we'll get dessert or something and come by the house, or whatever. We're talking about people that invite people over for prepared meals. Okay, so this is a relatively rare phenomenon. Certainly in 2020, it's pretty rare if you're obeying the rules of the pandemic. But pre-pandemic, this was pretty rare. In fact, for many Americans, there would only be 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year on average, right? So if you think if you're hosting the holidays at your house, maybe a Christmas or a Thanksgiving or maybe a Hanukkah, whatever kind of holiday meal you might celebrate, and then maybe those other times you might have people over 2, 3 times a year, maybe 4 or 5 on average. In fact, in the study, only 29% of all Americans at that time. 29% entertain only 4 to 5 times a year on average in their home. So a third of the population, let's say, would entertain 4 to 5 times a year. And that's high. In other words, the majority of us entertain, again, as we define it here, by inviting guests over for a prepared meal, even fewer than that. So 29% entertain 4 to 5 times a year, and this is coming right out of the study. The study showed that 20% of people, so 1 in 5, 20% of people entertain 6 to 9 times a year. 20%. So if you're doing the math, we have 29% that entertain 4 or 5 times, 29% entertain 4 to 5 times a year. Only 20% entertain 6 to 9 times a year. But this group that entertains 10 or more times per year, so you're once a month would be 12 times a year. So, just using that as a number. Think about having invited guests over for a meal that you prepare for. Not hey, they stopped by and we ordered some pizza or takeout or whatever, or we threw something together. But this is like planned. There's going to be a date. Here's the date. We'll have a meal. You're coming over. 10 or more times a year. That group represents only 6% of the population, or did at the time of this book, Predatory Marketing by Britt Beamer, right? 6% of the population entertains in their home 10 or more times per year. That group was the group. That 6% were the 95% of the buyers, okay? Remember we said there was a 95% correlation between the buyers of the high-end furniture? That group that entertained that frequently, call it once a month or more, in their home, were the buyers of high-end furniture. 95% of the time. Okay? So think about that for a moment. It's one of those things when you think about it, you kind of go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But it's not obvious. And this is why I challenge our clients, and I challenge you today, I challenge any group or business owner, entrepreneur, marketer that we go through this process with. When I ask you to think about what's driving the purchase in your business, and I get to emotions, oftentimes the obvious answers just aren't strategic enough. They're helpful. I mean, they're better than zero. They're better than just, maybe better than throwing a dart, at a dartboard and at an answer. Maybe not, actually. But in other words, it's helpful to kind of have the obvious answer, but it's so much more important for us to go beyond the obvious answer and get to the non-obvious. And that's why I ask you this question that I put up, and I'm putting it back up on purpose here. What's driving the purchase for those people who are in the bullseye of your target market? So I think if you have been tracking, you would agree the people that were the bullseye of the target market for the high-end furniture retailer weren't the people with higher incomes. They weren't the people that lived in nicer homes. They were the people that entertained frequently in their home, invited guests. And that immediately tells us a bunch of other things about these people. Like, for example, once you know that if you're a high-end furniture retailer or even the manufacturer, because knowing this would help you greatly too, you could advertise in a different publication. Like if you're thinking about the 90s, you might advertise in, if you thought you were dealing with high-end income people or the people that own nicer homes, higher-end homes, you might buy ads in Architectural Digest, where the high-end earners go to learn about their high-end homes, right? You might advertise in any kind of publication that catered to the high-income, high-value property owner. Okay, but if you know that the people that you're targeting, 65% of them are higher income earners. Sure, that's great, but they're also entertaining in their home frequently, 10 or more times a year. Now you might say, I'm going to place my ad in Bon Appetit because that reader is making meals, right? You might advertise in Gourmet, right? Because that's where they are. That's where your buyers are. 6 out of 10 of them might be, in the high income type publications. And then what was the statistic on the home? Let's go back to the home. The value of the home, 53%. So half of them, you might, in other words, if you targeted an Architectural Digest, you might find half of those readers are your buyers, half of them, which means you're wasting money on the other half, right? But if you got to a publication where the high-end entertaining folks were, so they're making high-end dishes, they're higher income, they're inviting guests over, and they're preparing meals, then you might get maybe 9 out of 10 of those readers are your customers. And even if it costs you more to advertise in that publication, which I don't know if it would, but you certainly would do that calculation when you're thinking about where you place your advertisement, right? But even if it costs you more, if that is going to penetrate your bullseye more effectively, then you'd do that all day. Am I right? So why am I talking about this in terms of a fear? Well, again, think about the emotion of the high-end homeowner, higher income earner, but the one that's entertaining frequently in their home. Where do the guests sit? When they sit down to dinner, what kind of table are they sitting at? What kind of chair are they sitting in? If you take them, into the living room for coffee, or if cocktails come first and they're in the living room, how is your television presented? Is there an entertainment center? What is that made out of? What does it look like? What does the sofa look like? The couch, the chairs. The furniture matters in that case. Why would it matter to you if guests are entering your home and you're thinking, I want them to see a higher end furniture item when they look around the room? What would be driving that emotionally for you? Could it be a fear of rejection? Could it be that regardless of your income, you want to project that you have money, that you're successful, that you're valuable? Would you be afraid that they would think poorly of you if they sat on a ratty couch or an average couch or one they found at their house, and you want to, in other words, why would you want to one-up anybody in this situation? It's because we all have fears about what others think of us, right? Well, when you're thinking about crafting a message for your high-end furniture brand as a retailer or as a manufacturer even, right? Wouldn't it help you to know that fear, if in fact there is a fear, and just for the sake of discussion, by the way, this, to my recollection, didn't talk about fear. I'm just taking this to the next conclusion, right? If that person buys high-end furniture because they're inviting guests to their home frequently, I'm looking for the emotion. I want to know what the emotion is. And fear of all of the emotions drives action more than any of the others. Now, here's where I want to take a really important pause. So if you have a call to make or a meeting to go to or whatever, don't do it until you hear what I'm about to tell you. This is so hugely important. A lot of what I'm sharing today isn't really rocket science particularly, but when you accept this tool into your toolkit, what I'm working with today is incredibly powerful. I would not want to hand a chainsaw running to a 5-year-old, right? Nor would I want to hand. So some of it involves responsibility and maturity, right? If I'm giving you a really powerful tool for your toolbox, I'm bringing this analogy in about the chainsaw because there's a certain maturity required to use this and to exercise this particular idea, a lot of the ideas, but especially this one, well. And if you are older than 5 and someone hands you a running chainsaw, my hope is that you're not enraged at the time, right? So in other words, like there are not just maturity and responsibility levels involved here, but I also wouldn't want to hand this to a malicious person, someone who is out to do harm to others. So as we step forward through this next few minutes, and there's only a few minutes left of stuff that I want to share with you today, but as we step forward through this, I really want you to think about this carefully. I don't want you to use the tools I'm about to share with you in a way that is in anything but the best interests of your buyer, your customer, the people you're trying to target and reach. If we've learned anything from the last 10 years or so, this grand social experiment that we've been involved in with social media has been around longer than that, but on mass, on a large scale, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, these other platforms. If there's anything we've learned from the large-scale introduction of social media into the world, it's that people with evil intent can leverage knowledge and tools to create a lot of problems. And they can do so to their own benefit. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, political benefit. The tech firms certainly have leveraged data about you. Probably they know more about you than you know about yourself in terms of your own motivations and your drivers and your emotional state at any given moment. Facebook is known to have manipulated people's emotional states. So again, manipulating people is not the purpose for which I'm sharing this information with you today. I don't want you, our Grow the Dream viewer, to be manipulating people. However, you proceed to your peril if you do not have knowledge of the emotional state and the emotional drivers behind the purchases that your buyers are making. What you do with the information, there's a broad range between ethical and unethical. And I really want to urge you to think carefully about the ethical use of this knowledge. But if you were a high-end furniture retailer and you knew that people were inviting guests into their home and there was a certain fear of rejection, a certain fear of how other people's perceptions might go if when those people enter the home of your buyer, right? If you have that knowledge, then one of the many, many things you can do with that knowledge is, in addition to changing where you maybe place your message, like we talked about earlier, maybe you advertise in a different magazine, especially in the 90s. Today, you might not buy magazine ads at all, but you might target people using your Facebook ad targeting who read a certain publication, right? So this is one practical way that you might use this knowledge. By the way, that nugget, no charge, but hugely valuable. But one of the things, and one of the most important things you want to do with that kind of knowledge is have that message that you're sending incorporate an awareness of the emotional state. In other words, you might craft a headline for your display ad in a magazine to talk about things in terms of the furniture impressing people. Your guests will not only be comfortable, but they're going to know something about you, that you have good taste, that you have, that you know quality. maybe you wouldn't cheapen your message to the point where you would imply that they're gonna think you're made of money and have more respect for you. But from a strategic standpoint, if we step back, and again, a lot of times we're not talking about the actual streams of water here. We're talking about the headwaters. What is the wellspring from which your messaging is derived? At the headwaters, yeah, we're probably going to want to be really super aware that the buyer of the high-end furniture really wants to impress the people in their life that they're inviting into their home, right? So for you, and this is where we go back again to the question that I've asked a couple of times already, and I want to ask and reiterate now, is there a fear driving the people you're marketing to? If so, you need to be aware of it. You've got to know about it, and you've got to understand as much as you possibly can about it. I've actually implied this already quite a bit along the way. When we talked about your bullseye of your target market, I asked you this question: what's keeping your buyers up at night? What are they afraid of? What's occupying their time and their attention? What's driving their emotional state? There are many people today that are terribly afraid that COVID-19 will affect their loved ones, or maybe perhaps even themselves. If you're marketing to someone who's in an at-risk group because of their COPD or because of their diabetes or because of their age bracket or whatever, their lifestyle, there are many risk factors that might cause someone to be at higher risk, not just of contracting COVID-19, but of having a really negative outcome, including now some of the long-term neurological issues that might be arising that some of the early data is starting to suggest. There are a lot of people that they're terrified of that stuff. And so regardless of your politics and whether you think masks are a good idea or social distancing or, the pandemic lockdown or whatever, regardless of what you think about that, if you know that the people in your target market, the real bullseye of your target, are afraid of contracting the disease, then you've got to know how that affects their buying decisions. Do they want you to deliver your product to their home? A lot of the food, establishments in the food service business have tapped into ways to help alleviate fears around this, and they're doing contactless, pickup for takeout meals, right? They're doing contactless delivery where they're strategizing ways to help people who are concerned about getting too close, And again, if you're staying home and you're getting delivery, that could be an indicator that you are afraid of the disease. It could be an indicator that you're just being respectful of other people and trying to slow the spread. But again, I'm asking about the emotional state of your buyer. So in your business, when they think about purchasing not just your widget or the service, the simple answer to the question, what are you selling? But the more strategic and the deeper answer to the question, what is the thing they're paying money for? Food satisfies hunger, but a certain type of cuisine makes me feel a certain way. And so why would I be willing to spend more on a high-end meal delivered through contactless means fast, while it's still hot or the appropriate temperature, you know what I mean? Like, what about that delivery experience is affecting me emotionally? Am I engaged in some kind of self-care? Am I feeling depressed and I want to improve my emotional and mental state by having a meal I really enjoy, prepared professionally by experts, the top people, and then delivered in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm contributing to the issues in the pandemic, right? That's a very different emotional state than the person who's like, it's been a long day, I'll just order a pizza, right? Different emotions. Similarly, think about your buyer, the target, the bullseye of your target, those ideal customers. What are the emotions driving their purchase decisions? And if there are fears, what are they? And how should you be aware of them? Now, to wrap up today, I want to tell you a story. And this is such a classic story, and I've told it to audiences now for many years. And I think that I first heard it, I want to say probably around 2007 was when I first heard this story. And a friend of mine named Bill shared this story. And Bill is is a business owner, entrepreneur. Certainly he was at the time. And Bill traveled a lot for business. A geek, tech like me, analytical. We got along really well. I haven't seen him in a little while, but I really like Bill. And he was sharing the story. He was traveling. He was in the airport. I believe the airport he was in was Washington, D.C. And Bill, if you're watching this at some point, live or in the future, please fact check me and correct, because I've told this story a lot. So my actual recollection of the details may have migrated a little bit, as tends to happen over time. But I believe it was Washington, D.C. Bill's in a hurry, as you are. You're traveling, you're in the airport or whatever. This is post 9/11, so this is a little while ago, but it was certainly after all the security stuff happened. So Bill is, he doesn't have time for a sit-down meal. He's grabbing a sandwich, and I think it was probably a Subway. And if you remember the last time you were at an airport, which for me was a year ago this week, he grabbed the sandwich, and it was a Subway, if I recall correctly. And there was no place to really sit, but they had those tables that you can stand up at, out just a little way from the restaurant. And so, you kind of plop your luggage down, you lay your sandwich there, and you're eating. And there's a few of these tables around, and Bill's by himself. So, as he was often traveling alone for business back then. So, a few minutes later, a guy comes over and is like, "Hey, do you mind if I join you here?" Because, same situation. Bill's like, "Nah, it's great." Bill would strike up a conversation with anybody. Well, when the guy sets his luggage down, one of the items is a really high-end briefcase bag thing. I always pictured it less like an actual briefcase, but like because I think he described it as being made from cloth or fabric, or maybe leather. It was really high-end though. That was the thing. And on the bag was embroidered in clearly high-end embroidery with, I'm picturing really kind of maybe metallic threads or whatever. He may have described it. I don't remember the details that he used. But in my mind, I've always pictured this as this really high-end bag that you're not just going to find anywhere. And embroidered in really super high-end embroidery is the Mercedes-Benz logo on the bag. And so Bill, like me, was a BMW guy. So in fact, I was driving a 3 Series convertible back when Bill told this story, and I remember bumping into him one day, and he looked at my convertible was maybe 10 years old at the time, and he looked at it and he's like, "Man, that was the right body style for that car, the 3 Series convertible." It was an E36 if you're a BMW fan. So Bill, my friend, is a BMW guy. The guy walks over, has a really high-end bag, and it's got the Mercedes logo on it. So Bill's like, "So, what do you do for a living?" You're like, right away, let's talk about the car. Let's talk about the logo on your bag. You've got a Mercedes logo. Well, it turns out the guy, if I remember, was in charge of marketing or was very high up in marketing for Mercedes-Benz USA. And so they're chatting, and my friend Bill is an entrepreneur. He's thinking like me, like, what kind of questions could I ask this guy that would cause him to want to share something really valuable with me today that I might be able to learn from? So he asks the question, "So when you're, promoting the brand, what kind of message do you convey? What kind of message are you sending that gets response, or that what's?" And so the guy answered, "Well, we have two types of customers." And right away, that should tell you something, right? When asked about the message, this guy first started with the answer related. His first thing out of his mouth was who. We have two who's that we're marketing to. And for the sake of time, the first category are people that maybe you might think of as a legacy Mercedes-Benz buyer. They've had the car for generations. Their parents or grandparents owned the car. They've been around the brand a long time. And he said, essentially, we don't really do a lot of marketing to that group. They are going to buy our cars anyway. And certainly they do marketing to them, but they're not, in other words, the messaging that they're sending isn't trying to compel them to buy, right? It's a different type of marketing to a loyal repeat customer. The second category he began to describe, and again, I'm paraphrasing. This is many years ago, but here's how I remember the idea of this buyer. The second kind of buyer, he said, they're probably up and coming. They may not actually even really be able to afford our car. They want to look like they can afford our car. They're on their way to success, but they really want to convey the idea that they're successful. They want to have people around them think of them as successful. And they're they're striving to, achieve a certain status in their life, right? So again, for the sake of time, just to shortcut the story, imagine that group. So he says to that group, we have a simple message. If you buy our car, it will make you a more valuable person. Now, I still haven't seen a Mercedes-Benz ad that said that in so many words. Not a television commercial, not a magazine ad, nothing. But if you think about that strategically as the foundation for the messaging, and that all of the other messaging is derived in some way and connects back to that idea, then that's hugely strategic. Because yes, it taps into deep-seated fears. Are you afraid people are going to reject you? They're going to think poorly of you. They're going to think you're not successful. They're going to think you don't matter. They're going to think you're not valuable as a human being. You desperately want to be perceived as a valuable person. Notice they didn't even say, if you buy our car, other people will think you're a valuable person. If you buy our car, it'll make you a more valuable person. That's some deep-seated psychological stuff right there. So with that in mind, let's talk about your assignment for today. We're going to call this your homework assignment moving forward out of today's strategy stream. I want you to take the raw materials that you've put together from strategy stream so far. And that means, who is the bullseye in your target market? What is the true product or service? And if you need to go back and rewatch or watch for the first time some of our previous stuff, I want you to look back at the notes that you've taken or you will take if you're going to go watch those. And I want you to, again, revisit all of those ideas and take the sort of raw materials from each one. So we're talking about how you've articulated and defined the bullseye in your target market, who they are specifically. Yes, all their demographics, their age, location, all that stuff, but also the psychographics, right? What kind of a person, what kind of a thinker, what kind of a, who are they in terms of psychographics? I also want you to take your true products or service, the stuff that you've identified are the things that they're really willing to trade money for. Something we haven't talked about yet is the journey that you want your customers to make. And I missed that detail. This is we're laying this out a little bit differently. But take the stuff from the bullseye of your target market, the true product or service, the two previous legs of your stool, and the third leg of your three-legged stool today, the stuff we've talked about, and assemble those ideas together into an overarching message from your business. So again, to use the Mercedes-Benz analogy, if you buy our car, it'll make you a more valuable person. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for here. I'm not looking for you to give me a tagline. I don't want you to create a mission statement of anything like that. I want you to think very specifically about the core of an idea, a very distilled, highly powerful, highly concentrated idea that communicates a message from you to your buyer. Notice this uses the word you. If you buy our car, it will make you a more valuable person in the Mercedes-Benz analogy, the example that my friend Bill gave when he told the story. Craft a message like that for your business, from your business to your buyer, to the bullseye, the person in your bullseye. Spend some time with this, distill it down. Think about who they are that makes them the bullseye. Think about what it is they're buying that makes your true product or service what it is. And think about how you can convey something that will compel them to take action. And honestly, when you look at that Mercedes example, if you buy our car, it will make you a more valuable person. If you can find a way to convey that idea to someone without saying it in so many words, that's compelling. And that's what I want you to do between now and when we get back together for our next strategy stream. I look forward to hearing from you. With any questions or comments, you can shoot your feedback to us, hello@growthedream.com. You can certainly tweet and interact with us on Facebook using our hashtag strategy stream and Instagram as well. And we'll look forward to having you back with us next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next live installment of Strategy Stream. Again, I'm David Johnson. So glad that you were able to join us today, and I look forward to hearing from you and interacting with you again. Thanks.